things are going to connect. It wasn't planned, but you'll see that things are will have a common background here. This is a resolution from May 25th, 2012, the Council of Europe, and I chose a few lines to read for you. The Assembly asserts the importance of freedom of religion and religious expression and upholds the right to rest in peace, interpreted as a specific aspect of the right to respect privacy and family life, granted by Article 8 of the European Convention on Human Rights. I'll get to that. It sounds boring, but it's not. The Assembly considers that there is a responsibility to protect human dignity in a broader sense by ensuring that deceased persons are preserved in their place of burial in a manner compatible with their religion. Now, this is very interesting because Article 8 of this, the right of private and family life, is supposedly, it says this way: everyone has the right to respect for his private and family life, his home, and his correspondence. So, if I would ask you, what is this talking about? So you say, okay, this is the right for dignity, family life, privacy, probably of people alive. And as we saw, the Council of Europe expanded the understanding of this right to the deceased. Maybe, or for two reasons, I think. One is the honor of the family which is still here, but also of the deceased themselves. And this happens sometimes when in courts and in places like that, when the judge knows what's the right answer, and doesn't always have the legal explanation, so he will take some kind of legal source and give it some kind of a broadening explanation so it fits. So I think this is the case, which is good, that it's not the natural explanation for Article 8, but whoever this resolution, they thought it's the right thing to say, that it also includes the deceased. So we already see one aspect that the Council of Europe acknowledges the right of the deceased to rest in peace, and we'll see in a minute also to be guarded and kept in dignity. So this is step number one. Continue. Before, that was 25th of May. The 10th of May, there was a document, a report of the Council of Europe, which actually you can see what based the resolution. And here too, I think there are some very interesting things which really connect to Lydia?
Yeah, my name is Lydia.
Lydia spoke about it, and I'm very, my wife says to me, you're not senile, it's just a problem of getting to the names. So if it comforts her, so it's fine. Paul, thank you. So as long as she's comforted, so it's okay. Maybe I'm becoming senile. I used to remember names much better. Anyway, so let's read another few lines. There are numerous Jewish cemeteries in Europe, and they need to be protected and preserved. They are part of the European culture heritage and constitute an important element of Jewish religion. So there are two things are being said here. One, which is obvious, that Jewish cemeteries are part of an important element of Jewish religion, okay. But also, again, the Council of Europe acknowledges that Jewish heritage is part of the European heritage. Okay? This is very important in terms of what European institutions like the EU, which is helping this work being done, will take upon themselves, because the Jewish heritage, although sadly there are not many Jews left in Europe compared to what we had for centuries, still they see and they declare that Jewish heritage is part of the European heritage. So this is very important. Then they say that, of course, because of the tragic history of the Jewish people, so many of these cemeteries are in danger and of destruction, etc. And look at the last three lines. Governments, members of the Jewish communities, and heritage organizations have a responsibility to develop appropriate forms of cooperation to ensure their protection. So this is very clear that not only NGOs led by good hearts and good people feel the responsibility, but governments of Europe have the responsibility to create cooperations to protect and ensure the protection of the historical, or what they feel is part of the European culture, the Jewish cemeteries. Okay, so this is one aspect that I think it can't become clearer. This is another resolution from 2019. It's about preserving Jewish culture heritage again. So I'll read the green lines. The Parliamentary Assembly considers that Jewish culture heritage forms an integral part of the shared culture heritage in Europe, and that it is therefore a common responsibility to increase efforts to preserve it. Okay, the same element, but we see that in 2019 again, this is said out loud. Jewish heritage is part of the European heritage, and therefore there is a European responsibility in all of its levels, government, the EU itself, and its institutes, governments, and NGOs to act, preserve this cultural heritage. This is very important because we'll talk in a minute, but we have bring some examples. Many times there is a gap between what should be done and what legislation in a certain state has to offer, and in the end of the day, courts rule according to law. And we will see expressions of judges that say, we understand your feelings, but we can't do anything about it. And Paul, you mentioned the difference between legislations in different countries, in different states. So in Europe, we have at least a possibility in cases like that to go to the higher level and approach tribunals like the European Court of Human Rights and the UN Human Rights Committee, and to bring in front of them cases which maybe in states would be rejected, or maybe were rejected already because of the problem of the lack of legal basis. And this is another address we can turn to. But, and there is a but, always in life there's a but. Many times, and we will see an example in a minute, we will have to show, the people who care about these things will have to show that they're connected in some way or affected in some way of the evil they're coming to amend, to come they came to the court to help them about. Now, this is not only in this area. In our day-to-day, we fight anti-Semitism. Our goal is to prevent more cemeteries. So it's two sides of the same coin. So take the IGL. The IGL is an international association. We have a standing in the UN. We have members, lawyers, mostly Jewish, but not only, from Europe, North America, South America. We're like global, okay? And we come to court, sometimes thinking this minute I'm thinking of a case we had in Germany about a platform that, an internet platform that's creating and selling Holocaust denial literature, okay? So we went to court to shut them down. And the lawyers there, we always take a local lawyer, of course, to represent us, said, with all due respect to the IGL, you're international, etc., but this is a German court. We need someone in Germany, a Jew, a member of the Jewish community, that will say, I'm affected personally from the activity of this Holocaust denial website. So it's always, when you come to a local court, you have to bring somebody. It can be a community, it can be a representative of the community, it can be a citizen that will say, for this example, I'm a German citizen, I'm offended, my parents are children of Holocaust survivors, and a website that says Holocaust never occurred hurts me personally, etc. And here, it's even more difficult because I think that's why one of the reasons you took this mission is because of the Holocaust, we don't have sometimes or many times anybody left from the villages or the little towns that were wiped out of Jews, and it can show we are personally the children of, the grandchildren of, because they're gone and they never had children or grandchildren. So what we call the standing, okay, by the standing, to be able to say it's my personal interest is sometimes more difficult, and NGOs sometimes are not enough for the courts. And I'll give you the example. This is a decision of the European Court of Human Rights, okay? This is the higher level that I talked about earlier, the optional higher level. Checking the time. Okay, this is in a case in Ukraine, regarding the Ukraine, two NGOs. One, the Union of Council for Jews in the former Soviet Union, and the Union of Jewish Religious Organizations of Ukraine. So they turned to the court against Ukraine, saying that in 1997, March 1997, there was an agreement between the Americans and Ukraine, I'm reading, on protecting and preservation of cultural heritage. As we said before, Jewish cemeteries are culture heritage. And these two NGOs felt or saw that Ukraine, in this case, wasn't fulfilling its side in the agreement, because cemeteries, you know much better than I, have been neglected, have been abandoned, haven't been preserved, haven't been taken care of as they should. So it sounds like a very good case, because I'm sure they were right in terms of the facts. And these are two very important NGOs. And sadly, the Jews that lived there in those places were probably, as I said before, not them or the generations to come that maybe never came, because their ancestors were murdered in the Holocaust. So they took upon themselves to represent the interest of those people and of the Jewish people and go to court. So I'll make a long story short. The court said two things. You can read it, but I will say it shortly. The motion was denied, and for two reasons. One was that they said, you tell us that this and this happened, you didn't bring enough facts to the court. So that's, I don't know these NGOs, I have nothing about them, I would be very serious, but in this specific case, probably they didn't prepare the facts in a professional way, the way you have to show the courts. So the court said, first of all, the facts, I mean, the judges won't get on a bus and start checking what's going on there. You have to bring the facts to the court. And maybe they were a bit neglective and didn't do it like they should, so that was the first thing. We said, we want, you didn't convince us that what you're saying is really what's going on. Okay, so that's, most of my career I was a legal advisor for a certain part of the government of Israel, and that was before I started dyeing my hair white. And I spent a lot of hours in the Supreme Court, and one time I was waiting for them to deal with us, and I was listening to other cases, and the judges, there was usually three, said to one of the plaintiffs, he said, this is, we're not in the television, you know, it's not what do you say, reporters conference here. You can't say, we heard, we saw, we think. You're in court. You're in court, you have to bring facts. So that's the first reason why the motion was denied. The facts weren't brought properly in front of the court, but this is something we all have to learn from. Bad cases make bad law. It's not only when the case is not good, it's also when you don't represent it like you should. So that's being a good lawyer or a professional. But the other is the more challenging reason, is that they said that they're not convinced that these two NGOs can show that they personally are affected by what they said is happening on the ground. And this, as I said before, is a problem, especially in what we're talking about today, because of the material is like that we're talking about deceased, and sometimes don't have anybody to talk in their name. And then NGOs, what's your connection to this besides you being a good-hearted person and a good-hearted Jewish person that wants to fix evil? But when you come to court, you have to have a standing. So how are you affected by this? You have to show me. That's what the court says. This is a very big challenge. And in the end of the speech, whoever is still awake, we have recommendations, and that's part of it is to establish, I'll talk about it again, but just one sentence is to establish, maybe in the EU level, maybe in others, the special standing of NGOs in these cases, because there's no one else to do it, okay? So, if there are any questions as we go on, so feel free.
Yeah, can I just ask you?
Yeah.
This particular example, which I think would apply to all the places where the United States has signed agreements with these countries, which is pretty much everywhere in Central or Eastern Europe. Could this be brought again, this kind of case? Because I could furnish you with evidence up to your eyeballs on this kind of stuff. with pictures and hundreds of cases in these areas.
I don't think there's a problem of, the court said its word and that's it in this case, because you can always bring other examples and it's possible. The problem of what's your standing, that's a problem we will have to face. We can deal with it, we can think about ideas, but it's the reason number two, which is harder for me.
Ukraine, which has not had a restitution, is probably a bad example, but in countries where there has been restitution, such as Poland, and where the Jewish community are legally the owners of these places and the inheritors legally, might be a better place to do it rather than in places where a restitution doesn't exist.
I don't know if we'll get to it, but
I'm just taking some free legal advice from what I
why do you think it's free? I'm going to say no. I hope we'll get to it in the time we have, but I have a few examples of state rules, and Poland is there, so exactly referring to what you're talking about, so the answer is yes, but you can never know. You know how you come into court, you never know how you will come out. That's the ultimate excuse of lawyers. Okay, so let's talk about now the state laws. Thank you for the question. Sometime. So some selected cases we can learn from. So Ukraine, just for the background for a second, relevant legislation. So in Ukraine we don't have a process of restitution of Jewish property. I won't read it all because of the time. But the bottom line is that we don't have ability to act formally for restitution of Jewish cemeteries. But that's the bad news. The good news is that Jewish cemeteries that were part of the Jewish community the governments will acknowledge their and the government bodies will acknowledge the responsibility to construction, maintenance, and protecting of the cemeteries. That refers to registered Jewish cemeteries. The problem is, as was described before, Poland, was Jews lived there for hundreds of years, and all around Poland, including small villages, and not always, but these were registered sufficiently. So when we have a cemetery which is not registered, question? So there's it can be taken over and might be used for public use, etc. And that's I'm sorry, I didn't change it right here. Okay, this is what I just said. Now, this is just the background for this example. In June 1998, the case was brought in front of the arbitration court of Ivano. I'm not going to even try to say the name. Katya, what's the name? Ivano
Frankivsk.
Thanks. Just saved some money by my dentist. Okay, he ruled that the Jewish community could fence the Jewish cemetery of Nadvilna. I think in Hebrew we'd say Nadvona, which is located in the southwestern part of Ukraine, according to its historic boundaries, which is something you're doing all the time. This decision was based on a protocol signed by Mr. Okay. Okay, so this is a very important decision. This is a very important cemetery. 10,000 Jews were buried there individually, and then when the Holocaust came, so another 6,000 were buried in in
Mass grave.
graves, and the cemetery was not to, won't be destroyed that way because there were already plans, and there are too many stories like that areas where cemeteries were existed in the past, the municipalities create a new program of building and roads, etc. And too many times these cemeteries just disappear. And I'm not, you know all of this much more than I do, but to fix this retroactive way is almost impossible because it's already, you know, the roads are there, the buildings are there. You can maximum show with the modern technology that what was there, but you won't be able to change, to rewind it. So once you get the right to fence it and keep it as an island, untouchable, so that's an achievement. So this is a good example.
Can I just ask a question?
Yeah.
Is there no, obviously it depends on country, but the very fact that they're removing human bodies at these sites, does there not tend to be a legal, legal issues with that? Or because it sounds like they're literally just stuck sewage lines through human bodies. Is there that degree of a lack of sensitivity across the region?
I'll answer you like a lawyer. Sometimes yes and sometimes no. Okay, I think in some cases, and I think it's not only typical for our material we're talking about. There is a constant tense between the living and the dead. Okay, cities with towns were small, the population is growing. By the way, according to Jewish law, in cases that you can find solutions to remove or to cover in a correct way. Nothing to do with the IJL. I personally dealt with the case, not mine, but was anyway helped somebody cope with the case. And in Israel there are many old ancient graves, and they were building a house just in a place, and they found graves. And you don't know if they're Jewish, they're Roman. You know, so many nations have been through this, the Holy Land. And there was a big fuss. They had to stop, and then finally, according to the religious people, it was important to them also. It's not that they said, okay, go at night and throw these not bodies anymore, whatever was left there, very ancient. So there's a way to cover it with a certain height, with concrete, etc., and then you can go on and build. So there are solutions, even religious solutions sometimes, but you have to have the heart. And sometimes they just start working and they even don't see it. So it's complicated. It's not always because they're bad, and sometimes they really don't care. And a constructor, he has one motive: finish the work as fast as he can and with minimum expenses, and get his money as fast as he can, which is natural. But if you find such findings, you have to. But once people like you will come there on time and say, "Oh, this is an old Jewish graveyard," and of course you can fence it. So then they can't say, "Well, we didn't see it, we didn't know. It was at night. It was a lightning exactly, and we were blind." So that's even makes the mission even more important. Okay.
Can I just
one?
give a little postscript on that? The SGF fenced Nadverna in 2018, and also incorporated the mass grave site which was attached to it. And today, Nadverna is a very well protected Jewish cemetery with the full support of the local authority. Just to clear a little bit of knackers there.
Yes. We didn't talk previously. This is actually it's the note I gave you before.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, we'll do just this one, Lithuania. So here we do have restitution rights, but here the story wasn't so optimistic. The Lithuanian authorities acknowledged the rights of Jews for cemeteries, etc., but only those that can be shown that they're connected to Orthodox Jewish communities that have existed in the past. So in this case, I think we can, in the end of the day, I have to shorten because of the time, so I'll just give you the bottom line. This is a case where the law wasn't strong enough, but courts are not the only way to influence the reality. And in this case, as you can see, read just these lines. To rectify this, at only Jewish Orthodox communities, the law on goodwill compensation for the movable property of Jewish religious communities was enacted. With this law, it was determined that the Jewish community of Lithuania would receive a one-time payment of 128 million Lithuanian litas over 10 years, in compensation for the communal property that could not be restarted with the framework of the 1995 Religious Associations Law. The point is that sometimes there are other elements that can be used that maybe for political reasons, maybe for other reasons, you can approach the high politicians, the high influencers, and talk about human rights and talk about Jewish rights and convince them to find a way to change decisions. In this case, a decision from Vilna Court in 2021 that asked to stop building a Soviet-era sport palace on a former Jewish cemetery, and this was rejected. But look at the bottom, most recent development in the case. In January 2022, the Lithuanian Prime Minister, I'm not going to try to say this name, had suggested that the sports palace could become a museum, a memorial dedicated to the history of Lithuanian Jews. So this is an elegant solution. There is construction going on. The cemetery is not recognized like it should be. So what do? We have a sports center there, but this prime minister was smart and he said, oh, I think it's a she, said, okay, we'll continue, but let's turn it into a Jewish Heritage Museum. So these are sometimes we'll have to be, think outside of the box. someone once told me, when you think outside of the box, you're still referring to the box. Think outside, not even of the box. Just think in the broadest way you can and get to the most creative solutions in the cases we can. And what I'm going to do now is very cruel. This is Poland we talked about. I can't, in the limits of time, get into it too much. But in Poland, according to Polish law, Jewish cemeteries are specified as community property that should return to the community. But in the specific case of the graveyard in Kalisz, is that also something you've dealt with, Philip?
Sorry, was it?
The graveyard in Kalisz.
Yeah, it's still ongoing. It's been going on for about
Right.
40 years now. Right?
So
The lawyers are making money. That's for sure.
someone has to benefit out of it. So this is a very important graveyard, and the community of Kalisz was actually wiped out in World War II. So there was an agreement that part of the Jewish cemetery will get back to Jewish hands, but then, again, these things are so flexible. No, not here. This one. In May 2022, the parties reached an agreement under which the Jewish community waives its claim to the building of the former educational center, etc. This is a case, sorry I don't have the time to go into the details. This is a case where the Polish officials changed their mind and changed an existing agreement in 2014. As Philip said, it's going on for years, and things that were promised previously were changed. And this is something that also we have to expect. Political situations and political forces in different areas change. We have the brave people from Ukraine that came here, very brave women that came here. I mean, who would you turn to in Ukraine these days? I have no idea how you're able to do anything there. So, I mean, Ukraine was a place you could talk to. We have connections. We had who to talk to there, but now who has in the Ukraine authorities who has time to listen to such things that as we're talking about? That's why I'm very impressed that you are still able to do some stuff. So what I'm saying is that this is very dynamic, and if sometimes when you even close a deal with A, after 10 years he's not relevant anymore, and the deal changes. Sometimes to the bad, sometimes to the good. But you have to be aware that these things are very dynamic. Okay, I'm already late. So last early recommendations. Collaboration, internal with local municipalities and committees, as well as international. Legislation and other forms of dispute resolutions, including at the EU level, because that of course influences many states, and involvement in national legislation process. If we see something going on, we want to be there and influence it in a way that will help us in the future. We talked earlier, need to regulate the standards of different legal systems of EU countries in terms of Jewish cemetery preservation and ownership rights, to create a database of good practice. This is very important. We do it in our field, and I think this is, each country has its set of rules, but still creative ideas that worked in one place should be known to everybody in every place, so can be used and duplicated in the relevant cases. Same thing, court judgments. Judges are human beings. I have news for you. They get up in the morning, they wear their trousers, right foot and their left foot, like all of us. And when they have a hard case, they will look for solutions. If someone already thought about it, other judges in another place, so if we will bring the ideas that other judges thought about, even though it's not exactly from their system, it can help them help us. So a database of judgments is also very important. Registration of cemeteries as historical monuments, that helps very much protect them. One crazy idea I thought about, I have no idea if it's relevant, but there was a big debate between Israel and Poland regarding missions or visitings of pupils to the Holocaust camps. And I thought to myself, why not declare and go to the EU the Holocaust camps of where they burned the Jews? There are so many remains of Jews there. Let's declare those places as Jewish cemeteries. They're not only concentration camps. There are, if you dig, you'll find in a minute, remains of Jews. And if there'll be Jewish cemeteries, so that's a different ballgame. So that's an idea. I haven't checked it, so it's just a thought. And what we said earlier, the legal standing of national Jewish communities. How do we get the recognition that in the historical story of the Jewish people, there isn't somebody else to go to court besides the Jewish people, even though they're not grandchildren of the people who specifically lived in this village in North Poland or whatever. So it's a big challenge. So at the end of the day, it's all about people, and where there's a will, there's a way. It's a big mission. So thank you for the important work.